Time for the roundup. Panic is widening over a possible Supreme Court decision that could bring major change to President Obama's health care overhaul. This week, justices are expected to hear arguments about revoking federal insurance subsidies for millions of Americans. Plaintiffs claim the subsidies are not allowed in the nearly 36 states that opted against setting up their own insurance marketplaces. People could see their bills skyrocket and be forced to cancel their coverage. That has several Republican governors now revisiting Obamacare. So could the Supreme Court put Obamacare into crisis? That's our topic this half hour, and we want to hear from you on our Fox 26 Facebook page. You can also weigh in on Twitter. Be sure to use the hashtag Fox26forlife. Joining us live in the newsroom is our Roundup panel. It's led by our Fox 26 senior legal analyst, Chris Tritico. We also have our news analyst, Mustafa Tamiz, and public policy analyst, Jackie Bally. All right, Chris, we'll start with you, of course. What does this mean for Texas?
Well, for Texas, it doesn't mean anything because Texas is still the lead plaintiff in the case and is not even contemplating this. But this, really what this boils down to is a be careful what you wish for argument. We're going to join this suit. We're conservative. We don't want Obamacare. And then you look up and realize I might win this lawsuit and my citizens are going to be without insurance or can't afford insurance. And so they're coming back into the fold and saying we better open these exchanges. The best statement of all is Governor Nikki Haley from South Carolina, who says, I'm still opposed to the exchange, but we're going to start setting one up this week. And what happened is the insurance industry started pointing out, and the hospitals and the doctors started pointing out that if the federal subsidy is thrown out by the U.S. Supreme Court, the price of insurance is going to more than double for all of the citizens in these states that don't have state exchanges. And that's why they're scrambling now, because they don't want their citizens to go without insurance. Interesting issue, Jackie Bally, for states that say, we're conservative, we fight, we hate Obamacare, but wait a minute, we better have this.
Well, they should have followed our lead, not get involved in it in the first place, because we as in Texans knew that it was a disaster. Gruber, the MIT economist who was the architect behind Obamacare, has gone around the country saying voters who believe in Obamacare are stupid. Why? Because he said from day one when he was the architect behind this with Obama administrators, he knew it would not work. You have to have healthy people like us who invest in it, who buy way more into it, and then you have the people who are not healthy or people who are not willing to pay to actually make it work. And if you actually described it that way to voters, a lot of us would say we don't want to be involved with it at all. So these states that are now in panic should have followed our lead because we knew it would be a disaster.
Except Texas is not going to do it, and so the rates for Texans who had to get insurance through the federal webpage, the federal exchange, their rates are going to double later this year if the Supreme Court says you're right, this portion of the law is unconstitutional.
And first we should point out that if the Supreme Court rules in this way, because they may not. Let's go back. First they said that people wouldn't enroll. First cycle, 8 million people enrolled, and this past enrollment, 10 million. So 18 million Americans have health insurance now that didn't before Obamacare came around. Then they said young people didn't enroll. We had record enrollment from young people both in the first cycle when 8 million enrolled and then this past cycle. So they said the health insurance costs would go up. Health insurance costs have come down, and everybody's talking about that.
Those numbers
then lastly,
hang on, let me finish.
I mean that's a fact. I mean, so as we say, Google it, right? The costs have come down for people, and if 18 million Americans have health insurance now, just because you didn't participate on the exchange, that insurance would go away, and the taxpayers, the local taxpayers, would end up footing the bill.
All right, I got to go to Sally, but when we come back, I want you to respond to that.
Oh, I will.
And I also want to talk about,
will.
about the fact that this doesn't kill the law; it just kills the federal exchange.
Right.
Sally's got our social media.
Okay, the Supreme Court tweeting out, will the court rule against government subsidies? 34 states stand opposed. And this guy says that the GOP finally getting nervous that the Supreme Court might gut Obamacare. And then this person quoting the Health and Human Services Secretary saying today when asked, what will you do if Obamacare is overruled in the Supreme Court? She said, I don't know.
Well, and Sally, let's focus on what the issue is before the Supreme Court. It's not, are the federal subsidies unconstitutional? That's not the issue. The issue is can you get a federal subsidy solely through the federal exchange if your state did not opt in and create a state exchange? And so if the Supreme Court rules in favor of Texas in this instance, states without a state exchange will not, their citizens will not be able to get the federal subsidies that everyone else gets. That's the sole issue before the U.S. Supreme Court. Jackie, it doesn't knock the law out. It just takes certain citizens out of getting federal money.
Yeah, that's correct. And I want to go back to the erroneous numbers that my colleague just made. He said go Google it, and you can't. So you'll have studies that say what he says, and then you'll have studies, and a lot of those numbers come from the Obama administration, and we know not to believe them. And then you have other studies like the Washington Post and Examiner that will say that the numbers that the Obama administration are saying of enrollees and people who are now benefiting, they are saying close to 2/3 of those numbers were already in it. Their premiums were dropped, then they got re-enrolled. Well, his point was that it's successful because of those numbers, and those numbers are erroneous, so that proves it's not successful.
But let's talk about the exchange,
sure.
The federal exchange.
Sure.
Texas is not going to do this like these other nine states.
Correct.
It doesn't matter whether we did it in the past. These 6 states are now saying, even though I joined this lawsuit, I don't want my citizens' insurance rates to go up so high they can't afford it.
Well, that's why
Isn't that responsible government?
That's why they should have followed Texas's lead, which is responsible government, which did see that this law was flawed, that the architect behind it said it was flawed, and people were stupid who believed it.
So you think it's okay for our citizens? You think it's okay for Texas citizens not to get the benefit of the federal money?
Well, the ones who are not getting the benefit, and that's something we didn't discuss, a lot of them are illegals who came here, and I personally don't want to pay for insurance for people who cross the border illegally anyway.
You got a response to that?
I'm sure he does.
People that are undocumented can't get the insurance because they don't have the Social Security number and other means to do so.
Undocumented is a nice way for illegal. They came here illegally.
So
I don't want to pay for them.
Finish.
I'm just saying.
Let him
No,
finish.
I appreciate your anger and being blustered about this, but
because I came here legally,
Let
and
him
I have
finish.
problems who cross the border and don't respect our laws. And you should be angry too,
right, let
because
him
you
finish.
came here legally.
So Jackie, we were talking about health insurance, not immigration.
Well, no, I don't want to pay for these people health insurance or education or
We're going to have to
anything.
leave it. We're going to have to leave it right there, Sally. We'll be back in the next hour.